Dear brothers and sisters, I welcome you all to hear and see this video message. Today we are going to pray for fertilizer autonomy in India. India, the fertilizer industry is around 90% of fertilizers importing from other countries. So, compensate the price fluctuation, government gives 2.3 lakh crore subsidy to farmers and fertilizer sectors. So, keep on giving this much subsidy, which is not good for our country. We should develop 100% manufacturing capacity in India. In this video, I describe about this. This content of the video have around 44 pages. So, I make it in 4 parts. In this first video, I will explain why we need fertilizer and what is fertilizer, why India needs importing of fertilizer from other countries and our dependency of imports from other countries. Reference for this prophecy prayer point from leading newspapers and magazines. Kindly pray and prophesy in the name of Lord Jesus Christ that India should acquire fertilizer autonomy for food security to our country and feed the world by following means. Number 1. Start dedicated national level research and development institution for fertilizer sector by 2023. Number 2. Soil organic carbon content should be increased to 6% from 0.5% by organic fertilizer by 2030. Number 3. Should be get 60% of nitrogen use efficiency by 2030 from present 40% nitrogen use efficiency by scientific research of better nitrogen management in our agriculture. Number 4. Indian domestic fertilizer production should meet the 4 lakh metric ton of fertilizer per day. Imports of fertilizer reduced to 10% as value of $5 billion from present 90% of import and value of $24.3 billion within 2030. Number 5. To enhance the demand and supply of fertilizer in India and economic viable, Union government should make the bilateral contracts with foreign fertilizers companies for supply of fertilizer and raw materials. Present 95% of raw ingredients for potash and phosphorus fertilizers imports should be reduced to 50% by exploration and exploitation of rock phosphates in Rajasthan, Satipura, Baswari, Lakshgar and in other states. Bilateral agreement for joint venture projects in P and K resource rich countries in Belarus, Jordan, Togo, Egypt, Peru and Morocco. Sovereign guarantees should be given to private and public Indian fertilizer companies to start production in those countries to reduce price and subsidy. Number 6. Digitalization of all agricultural land records should be mandated by 2024. Soil health card given to all farmers, mandatory by 2025, and organic fertilizer should have 10% of compounded annual growth rate and gets market share of 50% by 2040 from present 2%, and farmers should be incentivized for using organic fertilizers. Number 7, our agricultural crop yield productivity should be increased to compounded annual growth rate 3% from present 1.13% of CAGR for all crop yields such as patti yield to 6,000 kg per hectare from present 3,695 kg per hectare, and wheat yield should be 8,000 kg per hectare from present 3,000 kg per hectare within 2030 by blending of chemical fertilizers 50% and organic fertilizers 50% upon soil health analysis. Number 9, India should achieve the ideal desired usage of NPK ratio of 4:2:1 will be maintained from present exaggerated national average of 6.7:2.4:1 by properly regulate the urea subsidy and nutrient based subsidy. Number 10, expected fertilizer subsidy of 2.5 lakh crore on 2023 and 24 should be reduced to 50,000 crores on 2030 in a phased manner by direct transfer, and present subsidy of rupees 9,400 per hectare should be reduced to rupees 2,000 per hectare in a phased manner by 2030 to farmers to reduce fiscal burden. Number 11, global hydrogen requirement of 680 million tons by 2050 should be met by India's green hydrogen production by 50% of market share by 2050 from 0% today by Atmanirbhar and PLI schemes to make India will be global hub for green hydrogen manufacturing by National Hydrogen Mission to get the revenue of $150 billion, and green hydrogen price should be come down to rupees $1 per kg from present $5 per kg by slash of electrolyzer prices to $50 per kilowatt and renewable solar energy to $20 by megawatt per hour by domestic manufacturing, and use the polymer electrolyte membrane electrolysis by 2030. To ensure food security for a growing population in India and to meet increasing demand, it is imperative that there is adequate food production in the country. But land is limited resource, so chemical substances such as fertilizer in a pit to increase crop yield. India has always to keep objective of nutritional security of its population at top of its agenda. Fertilizers are integral part of modern agriculture. No country has as much area under farming as India. At 169.3 million hectares in 2019, its land used for crop cultivation was higher than that of USA, that is 160.4 million hectare, and China 135.7 million hectare, and Russia 123.4 million hectare, or Brazil 63.5 million hectare. Overall, India accounts for almost 10% of the global arable land as of 2018. Among the countries with large arable land, India has a much lower yield across key crop categories like cereals, pulses and fruits compared to global average. While India has the largest area of arable and permanently cropped land in the world. It ranks third in the world in overall food grain production after China and the USA, primarily due to low crop productivity. So there remains a significant room for improvement of yield levels in order to match up the other larger agricultural commodity producers. Increased usage of fertilizers, crop production, seeds and adoption of modern farming techniques are key to improving this yield. With its perennial Himalayan rivers and average annual rainfall of nearly 1200 mm against Russia 475 mm, China 655 mm and USA 750 mm, India has no dearth of land, water and sunshine to sustain vibrant agriculture. But as a result of increasing urbanization levels in India, available arable land is expected to decrease. For the rising food needs in India, we expect fertilizer to play a key role in increasing the average crop yields per hectare. Why fertilizer usage is important? Fertilizers are feeding the world. There has been rapid increase in use of fertilizers during last 60 years in India. Increased across to mineral fertilizers has helped immensely in reducing hunger and malnutrition in India. However, these gains in food production have come at a cost in terms of exploitation of natural resources and environment. Agriculture has played an important role in the economic development of agrarian India with 17% of the gross value added and more than 50% of the population depending on it. In the last 17 years, the All India food grain production increased at a compound annual growth rate of 3% from 175 million tons in 2003 to 296 million tons in 2020. With only a marginal increase in acreage, the increase in the productivity levels plays a vital role in the growth of the agricultural industry. As fertilizer accounts for at least half of the crop yield, fertilizers have played a key role in the success of India's green revolution and subsequent self-reliance in food grain production. The increase in fertilizer consumption has contributed significantly to sustainable production of food grains in the country. As a result, the demand of fertilizers has witnessed double-digit growth rates over the past several years. Today, India is the second largest fertilizer consuming country, the third largest producer and the world largest importer of fertilizer materials. Still, the per hectare application of mineral fertilizers in India remains much lower than in most of the developed and emerging economies. India's food grain production touched a remarkable high of 308.65 million tons during 2021. Almost 50 to 55% of the additional grain production is directly contributed to the application of mineral fertilizers, which played a major role in the success of India's green revolution starting in the 1980s and helped the country to attain food self-sufficiency by 2000. As a result, since then, the demand of fertilizer has witnessed significant year-to-year growth rates over the past several years and lead to huge imports of products and inputs that are not domestically available. In the last 30 years, consumption of fertilizer materials was growing at a CAGR of 3.3%, whereas production grew only by 2.18%. But in the last decade since 2012, production grew only by 1.13% of CAGR, which creates huge imports at an astonishing 5.81 CAGR. The total use of farm nutrients of 157 kg per hectare in India remains much below the levels in many agriculture intensive countries. For example, China uses 345 kg per hectare nutrients with yield of major crops being much higher than those in India. Our crop yields per hectare of major crops are much lower than the China and other neighboring countries. For example, average yields of paddy in India 3695 kg per hectare compared with 6937 kg per hectare in China and 4618 kg per hectare in Bangladesh. Poor use efficiency of plant nutrients, particularly that of nitrogen in India, is one of the reasons of low crop productivity. This has adversely affected economic viability of agriculture and farmers' income. What is fertilizers? Fertilizers are the chemical substances that is provided to the crop to increase their production and yielding capacity. Fertilizer offers vital nutrients to plants that aid in the development of plants and crops. Plants need around 16 nutrients for their growth. The three essential building blocks for increasing production are potassium, nitrogen and phosphorus, which are easily delivered by all fertilizers in various ways. Fertilizers are of two types, mainly organic and inorganic fertilizers. Chemical fertilizers are produced quickly and artificially. They boost plants quickly, which is why they are used widely. In contrast, organic fertilizers are produced naturally and take longer to prepare, but they are good for plants and provide all the nutrients they need without harming the environment. The Indian chemical fertilizer industry can broadly be divided into two categories depending on the nutrient composition: nitrogen fertilizers and phosphatic and potassic fertilizers. Urea is the major nitrogenous fertilizer. P and K fertilizers including diammonium phosphate, muriate of potash, MOP, and combination of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium and sulfur. Different crops requires different proportion of NPK. For instance, 1 ton of patti absorbs 9.74 kg of nitrogenous nutrient, 3.12 kg of phosphatic nutrient and 3.26 kg of potassic nutrient from the soil, while 1 ton of wheat extracts 15.96 kg of nitrogenous nutrient and 1.89 kg of phosphatic nutrient and 3.43 kg of potassic nutrient from the soil. The quantum of nutrient absorption also varies across different kinds of soil. In India, the ideal NPK usage ratio is supposed to be 4:2:1, but in reality, the usage ratios differ from the region to region due to variations in soil types, crop crown and farmers' price preferences. This discrepancy in the usage ratio is driven primarily by farmers' preferences. Price hike of fertilizer in 2022. Fertilizer prices follow the trend in international petroleum prices. A spurt in global demand for fertilizer after the pandemic from most agrarian countries including US, European Union, Brazil, China and India. has already upset the availability and price levels of mineral fertilizers all over the world. Fertilizer prices have soared nearly 30% since January 2022, following the last year 80% trade. An increase in natural gas price, the Chinese government's ban on the export of fertilizers, and the Ukraine war has reduced the production and movement of fertilizers at the onset of the sowing season in different parts of the world. Early January 2022, ammonia prices ruled as high as $990 per metric ton, which was less than $300 per metric ton a year ago. Urea and diammonium phosphate prices are high due to growing natural gas and gold costs. Urea production is based on natural gas price of which are closely related to international oil prices. Natural gas is an essential input for nitrogen-based fertilizers. From $10.75 per metric million British thermal units in January 2021 to $33 in January 2022, gas prices nearly tripled. Between October 2021 and March 2022, global area prices reached all-time high of $690 to $794 per ton. The international prices of DAP have increased by about 65.66% from $565 per ton in May 2021 to $936 per ton in May 2022. Sulfur prices have increased by about 138.8% from $216 per ton in May 2021 to $516 per ton in May 2022. China remains a major source of imported fertilizers for India with a share of 29% and 27% in import of urea and DAP respectively in financial year 2021. Both availability and prices were affected adversely following the suspension of fertilizer exports by the Chinese government in August 2021. Continuing increase in international prices of fertilizers and raw materials remains the challenge for availability of fertilizers and reasonable prices. Arranging the increased demand of fertilizer will remain a task both for industry and the government. Farmers are facing fertilizers shortages due to lack of proper rationing and distribution. State governments to take action on issue of black marketing. To enhance the supply of fertilizers, government should facilitate more bilateral contracts with foreign companies for supply of fertilizers and fertilizer raw material. This will help to maximize domestic production and fill the gap between demand and indigenous production. Early 2000, Government of India encouraged fertilizer units to put up manufacturing facilities abroad where raw materials is cheap and bring it to India with a view to reducing fertilizers imports. Farmers' crisis. It is important to provision fertilizers well in advance because any delay in availability could create panic among farmers. The agricultural sector still employs 60% of the population. For the small and marginal farmers, which constitute more than 80% of the India's agricultural sector, paying high prices for fertilizer in the black market will hurt their incomes. Further, if they opt to not use fertilizers, crop yields will drop substantially and will drive food prices higher and worsen the already high inflation, pushing 15% of the country's poor into acute poverty and hunger. Today fertilizer shortage is tomorrow food crisis. Rising fertilizer costs directly affect food costs. Why imports happened high and food fertilizer policy. There is a policy uncertainty that the fertilizer industry is facing in India. Fertilizer companies are unable to make long-term plans on production, imports and stocks. The government has been taking ad hoc short-term decision on fertilizer subsidy season-wise, and even these decisions are not taken adequately in advance to allow the industry to forecast and plan sufficiently ahead. During the last 2 decades, there were several tinkering with the fertilizer policy, but none of them were able to infuse new investment in the sector or reduce the subsidy burden on the government. Some of the major private players in the fertilizer business left the scene on account of unfriendly policies of the union government and inordinate delay in the disbursement of subsidy amounts, hitting them hard on working capital requirements. The lack of unified policy has forced several top domestic fertilizer producers such as Tata Chemicals and Aditya Birla Group to withdraw or reduce their business in India. Following the retention pricing policy and the encouragement given to public and private companies in the 1980s and up to 95, the country attained self-sufficiency in urea production in the year 2000. During this period, fertilizer production, which was mostly a public sector manufacturing activity, slowly drifted towards the private sector following lack of expansion of public sector's units and also due to closure of some of the operating units. In the wake of the liberalization economic policies, it was decided that no major government investment is needed in the public sector. Due to this change in government policy, there have been no major new investment since 1995 in the fertilizer sector. Since then, imports increased leaps and bounds to satiate the farmers' demand. In the meantime, in 2002, several plants which operated on coal, naphtha, fuel oil and lignite were closed down on account of high specific energy consumption and increased cost of production. This also reduced the domestic availability, leading to higher imports. Imports dependency and our production of fertilizers. India needs 650 lakh metric ton of fertilizers every year, almost 2 lakh metric ton per day. However, during the peak of the season, it will go up to 4 lakh metric ton per day. During 2020 and 21, India imported 203.3 lakh metric ton of fertilizer materials. Currently, India imports over 90% of the fertilizers requirements. The total value of fertilizer imports by India was $24.3 billion in 2021 and 22. There are 2 costs here. The first is foreign exchange outgo. The second cost is fiscal. The Indian fertilizer market reached a value of 858 billion rupees in 2021. India's annual urea requirement is between 325 to 350 lakh metric ton. At present, the country's urea production is 260 lakh tons, while around 90 lakh ton are imported to meet the local demand. India imports over 25% of the urea. In 2020 and 21, 98.3 lakh metric ton of urea was imported mostly from China, Oman, Egypt, Ukraine, UAE and Indonesia. In 2021-22, India imported 10 0.16 million tons of urea. For DAP, the annual requirement is about 100 to 125 lakh metric ton, out of which India hopes to produce about 40 to 50 lakh metric ton. Of the rest, 50 lakh metric ton will be imported. India imports 95% of the phosphates and 100% of potash. As of now, we import potassic fertilizers entirely as we do not have potash in the country. We require about 40 lakh metric ton of MOP every year. In 2020 and 21, 48.8 lakh metric ton of phosphatic fertilizers imported from Saudi Arabia, Morocco, China, Russia and Jordan, and 13.9 lakh complex fertilizers mostly from Russia, Indonesia and Saudi Arabia. As regards potash, the imported quantity during 2020 and 21 was 42.3 lakh metric ton, mostly from Canada, Belarus, Russia, Jordan, Lithuania and Israel. In 2021 and 22, India imported 5.86 million tons of diammonium phosphate. In 2021 and 22, India imported 2.91 million tons of muriate of potash, that is MOP. India imports raw materials for domestic production such as natural gas to make urea and phosphoric acid to make TAP. In 2021 and 22, India imported 23.42 million tons of liquefied natural gas valued at $13.47 billion. Russia accounts for nearly 13% of global fertilizers production and is a key supplier to India. Russia alone makes up for 14% of world urea supplies, whereas in DAP its contribution is around 10%. Russia accounts for nearly 23% of the world supplies of ammonia and potash each. Belarus, the major supplier of potash, 20%. This region supplies 43% to world potash pool. China exports 1/4 of the global phosphate, 13% of the nitrogen and 2% of potash. Our potash consumption accounts for only approximately 5 to 7% of the global demand for potash, which provides it with moderate bargaining power. With a limited number of global suppliers, the bargaining power of the Indian fertilizer players with these suppliers is limited to a certain extent. The war with Ukraine has forced countries like India, which use fertilizers containing potash, phosphate and nitrogen, to now look for other suppliers, especially as Russia may also consider suspending fertilizer shipments following the Western sanctions. Thus, the industry faces both availability and pricing issues for key raw materials on a regular basis. In 2021 and 22, India also produced 25.7 million tons of urea, 4.22 million tons of DAP, 8.33 million tons of complex fertilizers and 5.33 million tons of single superphosphate. At present, there are around 25 chemical fertilizers that are used in India. India produces about 80% of its urea fertilizers needs and meets 50% of the country's phosphatic fertilizers. But India still depends heavily on imports for the raw ingredients for its phosphatic and potassium fertilizers. India requires significant investment to increase in domestic production capacity. In 2016, the BJP government decided to revive the 5 closed down public sector urea production units at Ramagundam, Talcher, Gorakhpur, Sindri and Baruni. The situation is likely to get better with the commissioning of the 5 brownfield urea plants now under the construction, which may happen by the end of 2024. Once these units become fully operational, they will supply around 63.5 lakh metric ton of urea, which will substantially reduce our imports. There is a need, first of all, to cap or even reduce consumption of high analysis fertilizers, particularly urea 46% of nitrogen content and DAP 18% of nitrogen content and 46% of phosphate content, and MOP 60%, and maximize indigenous urea production to reduce import dependency and reduce the subsidy burden of our union government.